Hello everyone and welcome back to the HCW YouTube channel. My name is Rate Wrestle and once again we're back with an interview and we are joined by the Merc. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Something I didn't bring up prior to the thingy, which I thought was hilarious, is I went to this supermarket as I said, and I was walking back and there was a police raid as I was walking up my street. Just a black bag full of weed. So that's
Sounds,
not something you
sounds like
always see.
cause for a full raid.
Just full on raid. I was just like, I just walked past with a granny trolley. So,
Yes.
but yeah, we've brought you on because you are currently in the UK. You've got a tour going on, which I'm gonna have the graphic that you've got on your Twitter out on the screen right now.
Awesome.
Are you looking forward to all the matches you're gonna have?
I'm looking forward to all of them. Right now, my the only match announced as far as like singles matches is my match against Tomby at Kumite, and you can count also the WXW Shortcut to the Top Rumble that I'm in next Saturday.
Hmm.
So those are the only two actually announced matches, but I'm excited to just stay as busy as I can while I'm here. We got about I wrestled in Real Wales last night, and I've got 6 more shows while I'm over here until the 22nd.
Yeah, and it's Kumite the last show. I mean, it's on
No, the
20th.
next
Yeah.
the next day I've got Mega Slam in Bridlington,
That'll be good.
and
Yeah.
that'll be my last show.
That's awesome.
So
And you said you were trying to scout out Tomby, which we were discussing for previously, which is very hard to
as
scout.
as much as I possibly can, I'm familiar with some of the things he does, but I'm no closer to nailing down a weak point. So I'll probably just kick him very hard.
That's
That's my
probably the best
go-to.
bet. And then
My go.
continuously kick him until we got he's not moving.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the point of this kind of like the show has said you got to watch the Gary J one. Is it's just pretty much a this is your life, just going through your career. You've been wrestling for a long time, so for anyone that's actually watching this, we probably could go for like 2010, 2012 for like 3 hours. So it's going to be a brief look at your career.
Yeah.
um, so what we normally ask is, what's kind of your first wrestling memory? What kind of got you into wrestling?
My first it's not my first memory, but really what got me into it was Christmas of 1997. My mom got me and my brother, who was 9 years older than me, got us a PlayStation 1 for Christmas. Or yeah, PlayStation 1. And the one of the games she got with that was WWF In Your House, the
Okay.
game. And that was my first introduction to like a lot of these guys. Like I knew who Hulk Hogan was, but it had Bret Hart and Razor and Stone Cold and Owen Hart and Ahmed Johnson and all those guys.
Oh, man.
And me and my brother just we played the shit out of that game. And one day he was just like, "Hey, do you want to watch that on TV?" And I was like, "Fuck yes, I do." And we turned it on, and the rest is history. I was like hooked immediately, and for the rest of my life.
Awesome. And who was like your favourite at that point?
At that point, man, it's really hard. It took me a while to really get a favorite. The first guy like remember liking was Stone Cold because this would
Hmm.
have been like early '98, late '97 when I turned had it on the TV for the first time. So Austin would have been super hot, and I definitely like because my bedtime was only halfway through Raw over there, so I only ever got to watch the first hour. So they're like I remember things, but there are these weird gaps. Like I remember Austin not being champion and then being champion, but I never saw Shawn Michaels on TV until he came back in that like commissioner role for the first time. So like Shawn had to have been champion then, but I
Yeah.
never saw him because I was going to bed at 9 p.m. in the Midwest.
Yeah, and just Sean was always the last hour, wasn't he?
Exactly.
Especially the
Yeah.
DX era.
Yeah.
And then what kind of what do you think kind of led you to deciding to go like actually train to be a wrestler?
Well, I've been saying I wanted to do it since I was in kindergarten because I remember one day in school they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I really didn't know. I feel like I was leaning towards like actor or athlete because I was 5 and I knew those people were famous.
Hmm.
But I remember I was thinking about it at home while I was watching Raw with my brother, and I was just like, I could do this. I remember Stone Cold gave I think D'Lo Brown a stunner. I watched every fan behind facing hard cam put their hands up when he did. I was like, I could do this. This is what I want to do, and I just never let that go.
Okay, and where did you train at?
I trained in a town called Bucyrus, Kansas, with a guy named Chad Sullivan. Um, great guy,
Mm.
not the greatest trainer in the world, but he taught me the fundamentals and the basics, and he taught me how to do them safely. Um, but from there, I trained for probably 4 weeks before my first match. I
Okay.
was definitely, yeah, I was unfortunately hot shot a little quickly, but I was lucky enough to train with my tag partner who wrestles as Luke Langley.
Mm.
He's my best friend in the world to this day, has been for the last 12 years. And we just had the drive to want to be the very best we could at it. So even though our foundation wasn't totally complete, we had the drive to get on the road and network as best we could for bookings and go other places. And we both just had kind of a natural skill for it. Not that we're these prodigies, but if you watch any independent wrestling, you will see guys who you can just tell like don't get it and
Yeah.
never will. And we were just lucky to have enough of an athletic and mental foundation to where there was something to work with. We could grow just from experiences. We could have a match that wasn't so good and be able to look at it and go, how can that be better? Why doesn't it look like what we see on TV? And a general sense of awareness, I think, is really the main thing because there are a lot of guys, both good and bad, in wrestling who lack that.
Yeah, and you could just like there's some people that look at their first match and go, "It's the greatest match," that. Whereas if you
Yeah.
know there's improvement, that's good. The first match I could find of you, I don't know if these around time. So you were going by Morty of the Martian, I believe.
Mordecai March was my first gimmick.
Yeah. Where did that come about?
I had this thing in high school where I would just tell people I was from Mars, and I had a whole mythos and backstory about the Martian civilization, how we were forced underground due to a virus, so we were subterranean culture, which is why you never found evidence of life on Mars, and we were one of the first to perfect interplanetary travel because we had to escape the virus on the planet,
Hmm.
and so just weird stuff like that, and I really dug into that and kind of wanted it as like a I look back now and realize like maybe there was something there in like a TV gimmick because in my head I wanted to just like be a normal dude, but like tease that I was a Martian,
Yeah.
like just have like weird things like someone would walk in on me in a vignette where I'm like looking at the sky, like muttering to myself, stuff like that, which you can't really do on the independents, which are all bottle episodes as opposed
Yeah.
to a serial show. But I got the good advice early on that was like, no, if you're gonna have this, you've gotta be an alien. And I never quite perfected it before I just switched over to a more standard tag team wrestler. But yeah, my first matches were as Mordecai Martian.
Okay. And the first match I found you were fighting against Ryan Kelly, at MSW.
That would have been probably around my fifth or sixth match, actually.
Hmm.
My very first match ever was in Ottawa, Kansas on June 25th, 2011, against a man named the Mighty Sledge, who was he's from the Pacific Northwest. And I looked at him like a vet. This dude he's like 6'3, he's like 320 pounds. And he's super nice, but he's like, yeah, I've been wrestling a whole year. And I was like, God damn, a year. We were the opening match, and I lost by knockout to a
Jesus.
John Morrison running knee. But he was super cool. I had that match recorded, or there was a recording of that match on YouTube, and then the referee that recorded it deleted his YouTube channel. And so fuck you, Nick Chin,
Ruined
piece of
everything.
shit. Yeah, well, Nick Chin's one of my best friends in wrestling to this day. That little piece of shit delete my first match, but no, I do remember that match against Ryan Kelly being one of my, like I said, one of my first singles matches. Um, yeah, he got the win in that, but MSW Mid States was one of the first places to give me matches like that, and I
Yeah.
got to work in front of like excited crowds. They're based out of Harrison, Arkansas, and Luke, my tag partner, he had his first match there too, and he's their heavyweight champion currently. Has been for over a year right now, and it's been a while since I've worked for him. I've moved locations in the country, so I'm a bit further away, but they were a big part of my early and mid years MSW.
Yeah, and then you said you mentioned Luke prior to that because well, I was looking into it. You went via the KC Wolves originally, um,
Uh,
for a long
Actually,
run.
our first tag name was the Interplanetary Alliance because yeah, we started tagging when I still had the Martian gimmick,
Yeah,
and he was just Luke Langley, wrestler. and I was Mordecai Martian. So we were the interplanetary. We won our first titles actually about, I think, 9 months in, the Kansas Championship Wrestling tag titles, as the Interplanetary Alliance. But this is funny to me. We got booked in Oklahoma, and we were
Mm.
telling the our promoter Mike Two, who I've known for years. He's a great guy, but we told him like this is our gimmick, and he's like, I want something a little more grounded than that, something a little more realistic. I want what if you're like the Kansas Express? Something, you guys are from Kansas. And I was
Yeah.
like, all right. I'm from Missouri and Luke's from Kansas. But we were like, what if we just threw some stuff around, and we were big I think it was one of the sports teams had a wolf mascot, KC Wolf, and we were big American Wolves marks at the time. And we were like,
Mm.
well, this isn't going to stick. We're the planetary interplanetary alliance everywhere else. So we just went, we'll be the KC Wolves tonight. And that's when I started using the Graham Bell name, because he misheard my shoot name and was like, I like Graham Bell. I was like, I don't remember pitching that, but that's really good. I'll use that. And then as soon as I come through the curtain, the ring announcer announces Graham Bell, and some asshole in the crowd goes, like the guy that invented the telephone? Like, fuck.
It's already ruined.
But it's funny looking back now that he told us he didn't want the Interplanetary Alliance gimmick, though, because on this show was a character called Super Skunk Ape Jr. There was Spider Lee, a guy in a Spider-Man mask. There was, I believe, Maniac Mike. And then later, Luke and I would work under masks for him as the Swamp Men, Amphibian, and Reptile. But the Interplanetary Alliance was a step too far.
Yeah, I was going to say, being a Martian's a bit too far for this guy.
But, and that's when and Oklahoma just eventually became the crux of our bookings. And we were the KC Wolves there. And then once we started getting out other places, we really had more of a foundation as the KC Wolves, Luke and Graham, than we did the Interplanetary Alliance. So we just stuck with that for a while.
Yeah, and it's pretty, that tag team's pretty much a mainstay of your career, isn't it? Yourself and Luke. Continuous throughout.
Yeah, from really 2011 up until, I want to say, 16, 17, we were almost exclusively tag team wrestlers. Won all the tag belts there were to win in Oklahoma, won a handful in Arkansas and Tennessee, was able to wrestle as a tag team at like St. Louis Anarchy and Battle Club Pro and stuff. And eventually Luke had some just real life stuff come up, and he had to step away from wrestling for a while. And I wasn't ready to slow down, so I hopped in the car with the Hooligans, Devin and Mason Cutter, not the UK Hooligans.
Yeah.
But I jumped in the car with them, and they took me all over the country, and really kind of, they were the first vets and like real mentors that I had, because they were already about 12 years in when I hooked up with them, and they'd been all over and held tag titles everywhere. So that was a really formative experience for me. The about 2 years probably solid that I traveled with them, going all over the place, being in bigger locker rooms around bigger stars, guys who had been to the show and stuff. So made the best as I could without my road buddy there. But once he came back around, we were just kind of at different points in life too. Our schedules were different, and I had started getting regular bookings and had priorities elsewhere versus the places that he was kind of able to, because his shoot job also, he's got a grown-up 9 to 5 thing that actually pays his bill stuff. So he's not want to just travel across the world on a random Friday at any given point. So we just kind of but we've always stayed in touch, and like we've never had a bad split or anything like that. It's just our lives took us in different directions, but anytime we do get to tag or even just hang out at the same show, it's always a good time.
No, that's always good. And then like a big part of it, so SPRW, I was looking into. Was that you won the United States title there? Was that your first ever
Yeah,
singles title?
it was, and it was my only singles title for about the next 10 years. Yeah, that was Steel Rage Pro Wrestling out of for the year that I was U.S. champion. They ran out of Sapulpa, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
at a building called the Main Event Center, which I believe now is a drug rehab counseling building.
Fair enough.
But they ran every other Saturday for about a year, and not any of the best matches I've ever had. none of the best promos I've ever cut, but it's some of the most fun memories that I've got, like even to this day. That was like my first full year, like as a wrestler. Like I'm doing this wrestling thing. I'm not just like in my first year trying to go here and there. Had a consistent place where I was a top heel. Me and Luke were in a heel stable. For some reason, they didn't have us tag there for a long time until like all the other tag teams had kind of like cycled through. But I don't remember if I had the tag belt while I was U.S. champion, but I know I had them both at some point. And eventually, a time came for me to drop the U.S. belt to one of their hot baby faces. And then there was a a disagreement about other bookings and stuff while we were the tag team champions. And we showed up to one show, and one of the assistant bookers had to pull us aside and tell us that the main booker told him that we were not to leave the building with the tag belts that day. And we were like, okay, we get, because the main booker at the time had a reputation of being kind of petty and not communicating and just kind of taking his ball. But what was funny about that is, for the first time ever, I'd forgotten to bring my tag belt with me. I'd left it at home. So we only had one to give him back that day. But yeah, like I don't have a ton of like crazy stories from SRPW, but it was a real fun time. It was the first time I got to be like I said, first singles title. I got to have featured matches, get mic time, be in a stable, be like it's the first place that ever like featured me as like an attraction.
Yeah, and yeah, you did. I was just looking up. Yeah, so you did have both titles at the same time at some point.
Hell yeah.
Because you won the US title on the 11th of August 2012, and then you won the tag titles on November 24th, 2012. So you did hold them both, and you won the tag team titles in a handicap match, weirdly enough.
We did. How'd that go? Was that against Kid Crazy or Jake O'Brien?
Jake O'Brien, yeah.
I think we had attacked Kid Crazy and injured him, so he was unable to compete, or he was busy that day and left Jake O'Brien out to dry. Who knows?
Let's go with the first one. Let's say.
Right. Yeah.
And then you said like you were picking up momentum with Casey Wall, so you won the MSWA titles and the IZW titles as well at that point.
Yeah, in 2013, we started going down to Lawton, Oklahoma, which had was IZW, Impact Zone Wrestling, which was the biggest company in the state. The guy that owns it, he's one of the just biggest fucking characters I've ever met in wrestling to this day. My buddy Johnny's, but he had a great setup. He was a kind of a self-made millionaire, owned a pawn shop and a couple other businesses in town, and when he was in prison, he got really into wrestling. So he bought a building, got a ring, had a whole entrance set up, and real expensive cameras. And if you go watch it to this day, it's an extremely well-produced product, like even by today's standards. But he also had the best workers in the state, which we did kind of come in when I think IZW was kind of starting to lose some momentum, but because a lot of their regulars had kind of like faded out. Like Vader was their first heavyweight champion, I believe. Yeah. But a lot of the older guys that kind of had built it had moved on, and by the time we were there, they had ran weekly out of that building for 8 years straight. So I think like eventually, long story short, they burned that town out just running weekly. And unfortunately, the booking got kind of redundant. There was always an NWO type stable at the top.
Okay, yeah.
Usually,
that's when it goes.
Usually with Johnny Z somewhere in the middle, and it was usually essentially the same stable with a different name. And then John was bad about booking on a whim. He'd get an idea up his ass, and then like it's got to happen, even if it doesn't follow what's been happening. And he always had a justification. Yeah, but it was a good time because even me and Luke met Jermaine Johnson there, and we did a week-long Harley race camp in 2013 with him. And I tell people to this day that I learned more about working from Jermaine and rooming with him than I did from that camp in total. And it was a great camp. But Jermaine was one of those guys, like he had some eyes from WWE on him at one point, and he got the showmanship aspect of it, which has never been my strong suit. To be honest, I can come up with moments and I can have cool design gear and stuff, but I'm much more in it for the wrestling. But he knew like you got to have a pose, you need to have this catchphrase, you got to be able to find these cameras, and it was really great advice because IZW was a TV product, two roaming cams and a hard cam, and like they produced it and booked it like weekly TV. So that was, I mean, that was probably the most formative run, excuse me, that I've been on was going down to Lawton for I think 3 years, right up until the company shut down very abruptly. But I wouldn't trade those times for anyway. Made tons of friends, had a lot of good matches, met some people that are very important to me to this day. And really it taught me and Luke how to work. It was our true foundation. Like in Bucyrus, Kansas, we learned how to like lock up and
Yeah.
do a headlock. That's where we like it's cliche, but that's where we learned how to tell stories, at least like the very basics of it. So, and then MSWA was basically just like IZW SmackDown. They always ran the day after, about an hour and a half away. And legit, they would have almost the exact same cards sometimes. Same guys, same general storylines. And sometimes they'd switch like who went over and stuff. But they just stuck with what worked. It wasn't super original. So usually it wouldn't be unusual if you saw like whoever was IZW heavyweight champion at the time was usually MSWA heavyweight champion at the
Ah,
time.
okay.
And me and Luke held both of those tag belts
Yeah.
simultaneously, I think a couple times. So,
And then from OZW as well, you won a tournament called Player of the Year, which I was looking into.
yeah, Impact Player of the Year was just a tournament they did every year. And it was just a single elimination tournament that culminated in a ladder match, which I had against Jordan Jacobs. And I've never watched it back. It's one of the worst matches I've ever had.
Oh,
I
God.
knew it as it was happening. And it was one of the best lessons I've ever learned because it was me on a big stage in a big moment. They were putting me over because I think the winner gets a title shot. So we were going to use that for the tag belts. Um, and man, it just really taught me how to like, you have a shit match, you blew a big spot, you acknowledge it, and then you just got to move on. You can't carry it with you. It's like, because if that had like stuck with me and I just kept that in my head, it would have really fucked me up. But I had to learn. That's where I really, and I'm still hard on myself, and I
Yeah.
always like to nitpick myself. But that's where I really had to learn like to let shit go. Sometimes like it's done, it's over, it was bad. There's no making it good. Move on.
And then hopefully someone doesn't bring it up 10 years later on an interview.
All right, but hey, I mean that's what it is. I've had a
um,
lot more good than bad.
no, that's always good. And you said, look, it's always good that a lot of the wrestlers that are hard themselves always improve. Like if you just think it's fine and move on, it always helps.
Exactly. And I've been in the car with green kids where I've taken them to a show and they had an opportunity and they didn't necessarily make the most of it. And now I'm able to tell them, I'm like, it's not the end of the world. I know it feels like it. And I'm not going to tell you it's okay or that it wasn't that bad. It was as bad as you think it was. Yeah, it sucks. Maybe you won't get an opportunity here again for a while, but there are lots of other opportunities and you'll keep improving. You didn't have a bad match because you're a bad wrestler forever. You just had a bad match. Let's fix it.
Yeah, and like, there's not many people that start out and are just perfect straight away.
Yeah.
Like you'll have someone that's sort of like has with athletic background or something, but like everyone has to improve. So yeah, we're moving on. So this is at the point where I was just started picking up matches that I just found fun. Or so you had a steel cage bunkhouse brawl match for at MSW, which is the old
Yeah,
school like WCW match, which I thought was incredible.
I almost forgot about that. It's crazy because it wasn't even the main event. I think it may have been semi or right before intermission, but they just decided they needed a cage match of some type on this show. And they were just like, who do we got? I need 5 heels and 5 baby faces. And that's really all there is to it. I climbed the cage and I think did a big whisper in the wind off the
Mm,
side of the cage to everyone. But aside from that, that's really about it. I don't even remember how we got eliminated in there. I don't know if it was one fall or if it was like pins and eliminations. So, but it was fun because I know that show in Harrison for Mid States was at the Brandon Burlsworth Youth Center, which normally MSW runs the local fairgrounds. It's a
Yeah.
smaller building. It still holds about 200 people, I think, total. But at Brandon Burlsworth, you can probably cram close to 500 in there. We weren't at capacity, but there was a good crowd. And those shows were always fun because it's just a bigger venue. The entrance setup was more elaborate. It always just felt like a big deal show when you were there. So I remember that for sure. I'm trying to remember who the legends he had in would have been for that show. I feel like Rock and Roll Express were probably there, but
Let me have a gander while you're doing that. So for that show, let's have a look. Guess it was the Innovators. You wrestled 2 matches in a row in that match as well. Yeah, you wrestled the Bunkhouse Brawl, and then prior to that, you had you won the tag team titles against the Innovators.
okay, yeah,
So that's an impressive.
that would have. So we probably won the tag belts right before intermission, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And then probably came back. Yes, that the Innovators, which would have been my wife's ex-husband and his brother. We beat them for the MSW tag belts.
That's like a storyline and a half. And then another one that just I picked out. So you had a hair versus hair match against Brandon Groom.
Brandon Groom.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. I'll send you a link to some Brandon Groom promos later. I think you'll enjoy them quite a bit. He's got one about overcoming his dreams that I've always found very entertaining.
Okay. Now I don't know what's how did the versus air match come along?
There was a company, and I guess it still exists to this day. It's called Body Progression Wrestling.
Yeah.
Which is named gym that he owns that it's ran out of. Body Progression Gym. It's not a good company. It's just not. Can't really afford to pay people. I'm amazed I got paid the amount I did because I shot him high prices. But EPW, I knew I could almost always get on and get paid. And at the time, it was an excuse for me to go to Oklahoma to see my girlfriend. So, and if I was able to string together several shows, he'd put me in an angle or he'd have just big matches advertised because he knew I could deliver. And he wanted to get a haircut and he thought a hair versus hair match would draw. And it was a pretty solid match. But day of, he was coming up to me more than once. He'd be like, man, how you feel about getting your hair cut tonight? I'm like, nope, not it.
No, yeah, no.
Nope. All right, maybe. And I've still got a lock of his hair that I picked up out of the ring after that match. It smelled horrible when it was fresh. I refused to open the Ziploc bag it's in now. It was crazy, but I didn't even get to shave his head. He had hired a barber to come there and sit him in a chair and give him a haircut. So it was so fucking lame. In the I also think that may have been for the freedom of his valet shooting star, if I remember correctly. Because I remember Kevin Kelly liked the promo I did for the match because I didn't make it about hair versus hair. I made it about free will, and that hair versus hair was just like an allegory for free will. The winner's taking the free will out of the loser's hands, something like that. And he said he'd never heard a promo like that before, and he liked it. So, but Brandon Groom, it's always a trip. He's a fucking character in of himself. He did several squash matches on like Heat back in the day, and was down for a while. And just his views on wrestling and how to put an independent show together are very interesting, to say the least.
And when you said that, like the weight's not very run well, I instantly knew that you weren't losing your hair when you said that. So moving on from that, so you wrestled for IWA Mid-South as well. How was that like in general? Because I've watched a lot of IWA Mid-South.
Sadly, not super dope. I was never able to string together enough of a regular schedule with Ian to be like one of his guys. And I know he liked my stuff.
Yeah.
And I liked being at IWA Mid-South. And I feel like the way that Ian pushes guys, I really feel like I could have gotten some good big matches out of that and like some good stuff. It was just, they were 8 hours away from my house. And really when I could have done that, they were running on Thursdays and I couldn't make that work with my shoot job and everything. So my first time there ever was a tryout show at the Jammers skate rink where they
Yeah.
famously ran for time. And I was able to do some of that because it was on a Sunday, and I wrestled my buddy Spike, and Ian liked it well enough. He's like, I don't think it was either of y'all's best match, but I tell you what, you come back in a month to open our 600 show, and blah blah blah. And we got to open IWA 600. I believe it was 600, may have
Yeah.
been 5, but um, did not have a stellar match there either. That was actually the first time I met the Hooligans was at that show.
Okay.
But did that and then didn't wrestle there again for a long time. And I was doing a loop with Warhorse where he was booked when they were in Memphis, Indiana. Yeah, because they were running at a flea market. And trying to remember what match that I was in a 4-way with. I don't remember who all was in it. I think Dale Patricks and Aaron Williams were in there at some point. No, wait, that was a triple threat with Dale. Because I wrestled in that flea market a few times, but I was in a 4-way that I know Aaron Williams was involved in. I was in a triple threat with Dale Patricks and maybe Manders.
You were,
And then I
yeah. So
wrestled.
that Fatal Four Ways yourself, Alvaro, and Jake Lander. Yeah.
Okay, Lander. I love Landers. He's a funny little fella. Um, yeah. And then I wrestled Joe Alonzo there once. Had
Yeah.
a good match with him. And and then every now and then I just show up to the arena for shows when I could. But I never had any real like killer matches there. I was just never in a position where Ian could justify booking me against one of his like either his top guys or one of the names he'd bring in or anything. But I never had any bad IWA style experiences with
That's
IWA
good. Good.
Mid South. I never did any crazy death matches there, and like I was never in a position to ask for much pay, but I always got like $10 while I was there. So
No, that's always good. And yeah, it's just an interesting company. That's for MLWA.
yeah,
What I'm going
I
to do is
watched.
what I wanted to bring up at this point. So you managed the rest of the Kurikan Hall,
I did.
which is
I managed
insane.
actually a big feat for me was I managed to wrestle at Kurikan Hall and Arena Mexico within 4 months of each other. And the story behind those are pretty similar. Just those companies happen to be doing tryouts at
Mm.
various places in the U.S. And I did one for Wrestle One, and they're like, "Yeah." So what he's like, basically, what this tryout means is you can come train with us for free, and we'll see if we want to use you at all.
Mm.
And with the CMLL, it was essentially is like, yeah, you come train with us for 2 weeks, and we will get you some matches. But in Japan, we went there. There's a group of us Americans, and we had a training match that they liked. So they put us on a house show in Odawara, and they liked the match, which I actually broke my foot during because
Okay.
I used to do a big top rope walk moonsault to the outside as a big crash spot, and for whatever reason, just on that night, the guys catching me, who I love to death, and they're real pros, they were just out of position, and I had to land on my feet, and I busted my heel. And I thought I just fucked it up real bad,
Yeah.
not broken it. But I've talked to a friend of mine who's an orthopedic therapy assistant, and I showed her pictures and told her what it was. She was like, "Yeah, that was as soon as you told me, I knew it was broken." I was like, "Yeah." In hindsight, because it fucked my foot up for a good long while. I was like 3 days in that happened, and the rest of the time I was hobbling around Japan, putting all my weight on my right. I could not put any weight on my heel.
Mm.
It was miserable. And then a couple days after that, though, the match was good. That they put us on the dark match in Kurikan Hall, of which I have no footage of.
Oh, that's too bad.
Unfortunately, I
Yeah.
thought that our boys backstage were recording it for us, and they're like, "Oh no, we were getting ready. You didn't ask us." I was like, "Fuck!"
Yeah. God damn it.
But it's what it is, Like being honest, it was an incredible experience. The match itself was very good, but it was nothing like spectacular. Nothing that Kurikan Hall hasn't seen before. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that. But that being in Kurikan Hall, it was very cool because it was. Sorry, my camera's moving around. I'm
Yeah.
trying to
No
get a hair
worries.
tie on the wrist. it was it was everything you want it to be. There's just this air of reverence, and it felt like being in like a shrine. Like it was it felt big, but it was, even though it was like a smaller, intimate thing, but you could just kind of feel how special it was. It was really cool. And a lot the same with Arena Mexico. My foot was just getting better when I had to go there
Mm.
and train. And the training there was just as intense as it was in Japan. So I was in the best shape of my life, barring my broken foot, but it was a little bit more intimidating because a lot of the guys were, not the entire roster, weren't quite as welcoming as the Japanese contingent were. But it was a great time. Nitro, who's a perennial, just he's a staple of CMLL, really kind of props up a lot of the mid card and works with the younger guys, but can work with the veterans too. He took care of us over there and like treated us like family, invited us to his house for his son's birthday
Mm.
party.
Ah.
His son like turned 30 while we were over there. So like he had all of us, there was like, I think 8 of us Americans that were over there, and he took care of us. He got us pay for Cybernetico that we did in Arena Rey Bucanero, which is actually just an abandoned top floor of a mall.
Yeah.
But like it was like came out to like $30, but it was money that he gave us to wrestle in Mexico in a match where I got to do a spot with Ultimo Guerrero.
Well,
So
that's incredible. Yeah.
yeah, it was insane. And I was very heartbroken when Ultimo Guerrero turned down my Facebook request twice. It's
Twice, not once.
absolutely dashed me. I was like, well, maybe he just doesn't remember me. So I sent it again. It's like, no. And it's not just sitting there either. It's like, oh no, it says send again. No.
Like, no.
But being able to wrestle in Cork and Hall and then 4 months later be in the only building ever built for professional wrestling and the oldest company in the world, that was pretty fucking cool. Um, I didn't want to come home when it was all said and done, and that was literally, I think I got back the day before Valentine's Day 2020, and so I had about 3 more weekends of matches before COVID hit,
Yeah.
and there were already talks about like getting some of us back to Japan and stuff, and now Wrestle One doesn't even exist. But every now and then I'll talk to Kaz Hayashi, who is taking care of us over there too, and he helps run great in Japan now, and that's somewhere I'd like to be eventually. Like I've one of the reasons I booked this European tour is because I just really miss the international experience, not just learning stuff, but just being overseas or out of country. It's a hell of an adventure.
No, not many people, like, let alone going to Kurokan, but also wrestling for CMML.
Right.
Not many people ever get that chance, so that's incredible that you did it twice within like that period.
Yeah.
Um, and then prior to, we'll bring up the pandemic, which we have to bleep out that certain word because YouTube doesn't like it for some reason. I don't know why.
Wow.
We figured it out recently because well, I was speaking about Gary J, and then it just stopped the views because he mentioned it. But
Wow.
pandemic works, no idea. But something that we're going to try out something new, which we haven't done previously, which probably would have worked with someone like Gary as well, is because you've wrestled so many people, like a who's who of wrestling. It's like the word association game. That it's like I say a person, you say the first thing that comes to your head. It can be. It doesn't need
Okay.
to be a word. It can be a story if you like. I'm not going to be like just one word and that's it. We're moving on. So I'm just going to bring up a few wrestlers and see what you think.
All right.
So we'll go with Mandrews. One called Manders.
Maybe my favorite opponent. Definitely the one I've had the most consistent, best quality matches with. If I had to choose someone to debut at a company against almost anywhere in the world, it would be Manders. He hits like a truck. He doesn't bitch about getting hit like a truck. He is down to do crazy shit, to take, to give, and we just have a big mutual respect for each other. And we've had some up and downs like in our friendship that like we've been at various levels of maturity in our lives.
Yeah.
And so there have been times where we were good buds and then we were really just kind of pissy with each other about just dumb shit. And then really the match that like kind of like rekindled our friendship was after the bleep demic. One of the first action wrestling shows back, me and him had a match that to this day I would put up against almost anything. I've had a guy tell me that uh, it's the reason he got into independent wrestling was because he happened to see that match and was like, okay, this,
Hmm.
which is that's a big compliment. And me and Manders have just never had a bad match,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad to see that he's always been on a steady climb, and he's really starting to take off, and he's cruising at 100 miles an hour right now, and I hope he doesn't slow down for a long time.
Yeah, like every Manda's match that I've seen has been great as well. Like he's really good in the ring, fun to watch. I called him Mandrews because that's a UK wrestler, and it just popped in my head. I think Mark
That's what
Andrews. That's what popped in my head. Yeah, I was like, hold on.
I was like, that's a weird one to start off with because I've never met the fella.
It's because he's a UK guy. I think it just mixed in my head. We'll go with Eddie only.
What a mess. I I think I've only wrestled Eddie once
Yeah.
at IWA, but it was a lot of fun, and I always enjoyed seeing him. And I was when he started like kind of dropping off the scene, it bummed me out. But every time he does kind of pop up, it makes me happy to see he's still this stocky little jacked motherfucker smoking cigarettes and stuff. I've always gotten along with Eddie. He's a cool dude.
Davey Vega.
I like Vega a lot. Me and Vega, like, there's never been any heat or anything like so. And I know that's a sketchy way to start
Yeah,
out a
yeah.
statement.
It was like,
I feel like our personalities, I don't think necessarily click, and I think that's because we're both weird, shy people, and
okay.
so like weirdly, we're a little too similar in that regard. But I've went to Texas with Vega more than a couple times when VIP Wrestling was booking us both, and we never had any like stellar conversations, but Vega was always good about making sure I got paid and was taken care of, and was always looking at making sure, like, because he's the veteran dude in the car, making sure I didn't get taken advantage of really anytime. I remember once I rode with him and Fitchett and the Hooligans up to Minneapolis for one of the very first wrestling WrestlePaloozas.
Hmm.
And the Hooligans at the time had this guy who was like a fan, but he had a van, so, and he wanted to drive guys around the country and do stuff. So, but this dude, and I was like 4 or 5 years in at this point, but this guy who had this van was having me fucking load up his cigarettes in the passenger seat with this little tobacco packing machine. And like Vega didn't have to do it, but he was like, "Hey man, I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna talk to them because you shouldn't have to do that because
Yeah.
you're not his green kid. He's not even a manager." So Vega, it's like we've never been close, but he's always been real good to me, and he's just extremely talented too. One of the most, like, I know it's cliche, but he is one of the most underrated wrestlers in the world. And if he'd had the body that he's got now, like 6 years ago, he'd be making a lot more money than he is right now. But he seems to be at a good place in his life right now. I've seen him a lot more recently than I have the last few years, and it's always good just saying hey, catching up a little bit.
Yeah, okay. And then there's three more. So we'll go in random order. I saw you wrestled Effie. So that's sort of
I
everyone I
love
thought grew
Effie.
up. Yeah.
I got to wrestle Effie at FIP like right before he blew up nationally. He was already the biggest shit at Fest Wrestling,
Hmm.
and so I was only tangentially aware of Effie. I knew kind of who he was, but not his whole shtick. But I got to FIP probably like an hour before we were supposed to go on. I had driven 17 hours there straight.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I was like, "Hey man, let's do some crazy shit." And he's like, "Okay." And we just had a really fun match, and he's been super cool with me ever since. And Effie gets the part of wrestling that my brain doesn't compute, how to market and brand and how to do that. I'll be straight up with anyone. I'm not a natural entertainer. I like to go out and have fun, but I'm very much a wrestler.
Yeah.
Um, but Effie is a great personification of just what that entertainer aspect can do. And he's a badass wrestler. He has great matches, especially whenever he decides he wants to have a wrestling match. He knows how to fucking do it.
No, he's brilliant, Effie. I've not yet. He's been over the UK a few times. I've not yet been able to see him, so I'm hoping this year I'll be able to catch him.
He's
Uh,
doing another gay brunch over here before too long, isn't
yeah,
he?
yeah, TNT, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which in Liverpool, so I'm hoping to get down to there. And then the penultimate one, just because it's just an incredible opponent, Max the Impaler.
Ah, man, they're fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I wrestled Max when they were, I was maybe their like fifth match, I think,
Mm.
like singles. Cause I want to say when they started at IWA, they got the women's belt like immediately, like maybe their first match. And so I remember they were very nervous. They wanted to keep it super simple. And I think just because they didn't know me and I was a guy, and
Mm.
at the time she was still identifying publicly as a woman. So I think they were like, I don't know if this dude's gonna want to put over a chick. And even Ian was like, it's not gonna hurt you to lose to a woman the way she's built here. I was like, man, I got no problem losing to a woman or anything. But we ended up having a really fun match, and they were super nice, like very appreciative afterwards. And it's always been good seeing him after. I don't get to see him that often, but when I do, like I saw him backstage at AEW when I was able to do some extra work and got to catch up with him a little bit. But Max is a super nice person, a hard worker, gets their character, and I just want to see him have all the success they've had just continued 10 times over because they deserve it.
Yeah, they're a very good wrestler. And then the one I want to bring up the most is my favourite US independent wrestler is Gary J.
Grumpy vet. If I had to do word association, Gary, man, my opinions on Gary have shifted so much over the years. Because when I first saw him, I really didn't like his work a ton. I didn't like his look at first, just this real skinny, pale, and like
Mm.
I didn't get it at first because like, okay, his gimmick is that his gear's not very good, and he looks like that, and he hits people too hard for real. But the and it's like I almost felt like a fucking poser because the very first time I was ever in the car with Gary, he won me over immediately. He was because he backstage and like Gary's not gonna go out of his way to like make friends. Like he's not rude or anything, but like he always just seemed a little cantankerous when I'd see him at shows. But as soon as I got in the car with him, he was cracking jokes and he was just like, man, this guy better fucking use you today. I don't see why he fucking wouldn't. We got a battle royal. All these guys are showing up. What? You're good. Why don't you have a fucking match? And Gary's probably like done more straight up legwork to get me booked places than anyone else. We were sitting next to Matt Nix at a Black Label Pro show one time when Matt Nix was still booking freelance, and Gary just goes, "You should book him. Why aren't you booking him?" just like just putting Matt Nix on the spot, and like Gary will do that for any of the guys he believes in. I know a lot of the younger guys that come into Anarchy are because Gary J told Jackson, "We need these guys here." When I got to have a little run with Luke at Anarchy, I know the reason like originally that I was given that shot originally as a singles switch to tag, but was because Gary went to him and said, "Hey, he's grown a lot. His attitude's better. His work's a lot better." Dot dot dot. So Gary's a Gary is a value to the independent scene, and I couldn't be happier that he's getting that match against Masato Tanaka in
Yeah.
October. Gary's a he's a huge wrestling fan. But if you talk to Gary, he's not a big mark for wrestling. Like he is, but in a different way. He doesn't have a lot of in his fandom, but not in the profession sense. He doesn't have a list of dream opponents. He
Mm.
has guys like I think I could do good work with this dude. I like working this dude. But as far like anytime anyone who's talked to Gary knows his list of dream opponents is one person long, and it's Masato Tanaka. And so I'm gonna do everything in my power to be there on October 12th when he wrestles him because if anyone deserves it, it's Gary.
Yeah, it's gonna be incredible as well. Like Masada Tanaka and then Gary J hitting each other. And what people don't really like, Gary J is like, because when we had him on the channel, I didn't know what to expect because, as I said, he's one of my favourite wrestlers. He's so respectful and like, he was just really happy someone from the UK knew him. That was his game. It
Yeah.
was like, and I was just like, I'm really happy you wanted to be on here. We're just blushing over each other. And then when I actually met him like in person at Kumite, he was just like the nicest guy. He was just really happy to be there, and he had a match with Alton Form, one of the main stays of Kumite, and because Kumite is big for the death match, but they're good for the non-death match matches, and that match
Right.
was the kind of match where it wasn't a death match, but they hit each other so hard it might as well have been a death match.
Right. No, I get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've only had one singles against Gary, and it was a hard hitting affair. He can give as good as he gets, and so can I. So I definitely want a rematch with him at some point, though.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, we'll move on to the bleep, which would normally what we speak to about now is like the pandemic. It's more about like the outer side of wrestling. So like music wise, like what kind of music you into?
I the easy answer is like 2000s pop punk and like classic rock would be my go-tos. I've gotten way into more like 2000s and 2010s alt country,
Hmm.
which alt country is not even the best. It's bands like Goodnight Texas, and it's like it's folksy and kind of gothic, um, shit like that. But I switched. I didn't listen to a lot of music for a long time. I think because I've kind of burned myself out on the same playlist over and over. I'm a big podcast guy.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I listen to them at work. I listen to them at the gym even. I've gotten more back into music lately. I don't discover a lot of new stuff because I'm over the age of 30 and that part of my brain is essentially shut down. And I've never been like a huge music guy, but like big Bowling for Soup fan,
Yeah.
big Green Day guy, love ACDC, love Aerosmith, Quiet Riot, and then some of the smaller bands like I'm a big American Hi-Fi fan. I think they're
Hmm.
underrated. They've got some super catchy, super good songs. Jimmy Eat World has always been. I'm never sad when Jimmy Eat World comes on, but that's about it. I'm a huge Meatloaf fan too.
Oh.
Bad Out of Hell is my shit. If any of his songs are all good enough and epic enough to be entrance songs, but you can't use any of them. They're all too long. The intros ramble on.
Yeah.
But goddamn, Paradise by the Dashboard Lights. I think every teenager should have to listen to that song before they lose their virginity at some
Yeah.
point.
To segue for that, I've got a meatloaf story. My dad used to. There's like a venue in the in Birmingham where I live, where I lived, which is like a music venue, and he was like a security side kind of guy there, and Meatloaf puked on him.
Hell yeah.
Basically, yeah, because Meatloaf obviously big guy, but he runs around
Yeah.
continuously. For someone his
Yeah.
size, he shouldn't be doing it. And my dad used to be the guy that give you like the gas canister, just trying to give him air. Gave him the gas
Okay.
canister, he did it and just puked all over
That's
him.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
incredible
that makes me
story.
so happy.
So what we do on the show as well is we've got this series which I'm losing in marvelously. Is basically we do a top three artists and then we put a poll on Twitter and see whose top three artists are the best. And I'm losing 5-1.
Mm.
So who would you say is your top five artists? Top three artists, sorry.
And this is just like personal
Yeah,
preference.
yeah, your favourite artist, yeah, basically.
All right. To preserve your losing streak, I'm going to start with Freddie Mercury.
God damn it.
Um, because him and Meatloaf are very much of a common cloth of like guys that just have this insane range and this insane
Yeah.
just energy in their voice. Um, I'll give you a fighting chance here when I throw a Billy Joe Armstrong in there. Um, I love Green Day's music. I was in eighth grade when American Idiot came out, and so like that was just so formative for me. And
It can be the band as well. So if you prefer Green Day
I,
rather than Billy Joe, or
okay, I'll do Green Day then. I'll probably keep Freddie Mercury on his own just
yeah,
because like I think of him specifically. I'll do Green Day though, but
yeah,
I will continue to sing his praises because I think he's a great songwriter, a
hmm,
great lyricist, and people shit on Green Day for selling out, but I don't ever really think they did the way people thought they did. I think they grow as people and art as artists, and I think I just love Green Day. I think they're
yeah.
amazing. And then number three, I don't know if he'd normally make a top three, but I like having eclectic lists. I'm gonna go with Hank Williams the third.
Okay.
I really like a lot of his music. I think now, I don't know his entire catalog. I'm sure there's some problematic stuff in there because he's a wild outlaw type,
Yeah.
but I think his music is very honest about a lot of what his experience was. That family seems to be just a tad bit cursed as far as like father figures go. Um, but his song Three Shades of Black, I always think of just professional wrestlers when I hear that
Mm.
song. Fuck, I can't remember the name of the song. The Hooligans used to come out to one, but a lot of his songs are about like doing pills and being poor and like that kind of like dark part. When people think of like the poor parts of Appalachia, they just think of like barefoot farmers and coveralls and stuff. And his is that much grittier. Like it's not just alcohol and stuff; it is crime and like abuse and pills, and it's really fucked up. Like, but his music, he's very talented. He's a great singer songwriter, and like I said, I like the honesty in his music. It's not pretty, and he doesn't dress it up.
Ah, that's fair
So
enough.
those are my favorite.
You're probably going to win again. Basically, this all came about because there was a guy called Corey McRae who was a UK wrestler, and his top three against mine, which I'll let you know mine in a sec, which was Queen. So you've already done me. Elvis Presley and the Beatles, and it's like, come on.
Ah, that's that's cheating.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not.
like, come on. And then my top three are Disturbed, um, Avril Lavigne, um, and Oasis, a UK band.
Well, you
Um,
deserve every loss you've gotten.
yeah, so I've won one now.
I'll say this though. I think it was 2011 when Avril Lavigne came out with "What the Hell." That song blared out of my windows a lot when I was 19 years old and just broke his shit and trying to wrestle. I blasted that song nonstop.
Yeah, that's same kind of flipping. I just get it's Avril Lavigne. Anything she does, I'm like, it's fine, even if it's not. Like Hello Kitty, good God. And then so do you watch many films or anything like that? Segueing from music.
I I like movies. I always just feel like I'm so behind. I watched three on the flight over here. I watched About My Father, which is Sebastian Maniscalco and Robert De Niro, and it was pretty
Hmm.
solid. It was what I wanted out of a 90-minute comedy
Yeah.
about like based on this dude's real life to an extent. I watched the Dungeons and Dragons movie,
Ah,
which
okay.
was way better than I thought it was going to be. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then what was the other one I watched? Oh, I watched Cocaine Bear, which I watched that mostly because I heard you and Gary talk about it. And it was fine.
Yeah, it's just weird, isn't it? It's just like there is funny bits in it, but then it's just like, wow, what's happening?
Yeah, it feels like it tried a little bit too hard, but like I don't know, I enjoyed the cop, the black guy.
Yeah.
I enjoyed him. Just the whole thing with his dog made me chuckle a few times. And I think my favorite part was just near the beginning where the two kids like find the cocaine and they're just being kids. Like, how do you take it? You eat it.
I'm going to segue to that. There's a flipping film that's coming out soon, a horror film called Sloth House. Um,
Sloth House?
yeah, which it's a murder sloth. I've not seen
Oh
the
yeah.
trailer or anything. I don't understand how it's going to work. So, like,
One of my things to do while I'm over here and I actually have time at some point to sit and watch movies is to watch Knock at the Cabin Door
oh,
with
the one with
Batista.
Batista, yeah.
I've not heard a lot about it, but the previews interested me immensely. And M Night has been behaving himself lately
Hmm.
with this movie. So, but just the previews itself, I'm really interested in seeing it. There are a handful of other ones. I just the other day, after like 2 years of trying, was able to watch The Lighthouse with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and I really liked it because I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan,
Yeah.
and it gave me all the H.P. Lovecraft vibes that I wanted it to have, and it did it so beautifully too, where the ending was just so weird and ambiguous. Like it felt like the end of a Lovecraft story because Lovecraft is always good about like building and building, and you're expecting this big resolution, and you never really quite get it.
Yeah, and then every film as well, and then you're expecting the next one. It's still not. I don't know. Well, you feel it's going to happen.
Yeah,
And then before we go back to the wrestling, what kind of podcast do you listen to then?
mostly comedy podcasts. There's these three brothers in America called the McElroys, and they've
Hmm.
got like a whole umbrella of them. The main ones I listen to are their flagship one, My Brother and Me. They call it an advice podcast, but readers just send in like questions looking for advice, and they just riff on that for like an hour, hour and a half, and it just makes me laugh because it's these three brothers cracking each other up, and you get to listen in, and it's one of those podcasts where you kind of feel like you're there with them.
Yeah.
They got another one called The Adventure Zone, which is where they do it's a storytelling episodic podcast where they just use different tabletop role playing games, and it's a real play podcast. They've done Dungeons and Dragons, Monster of the Week, and Blades in the Dark are the games they've played. But it's really good, especially when the youngest brother is the game master. He's really good at storytelling. And then I listen to Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. I've always been a big Conan O'Brien fan. And then Dax Shepard has one called Armchair Expert, and it's funny like getting into that because Dax is he's not known for being like a highfalutin type A-list actor type, but he's an incredibly smart dude, recovering addict like for the past 17 years, and he has actors and celebrities and stuff on, but he doesn't ask about their career so much as he asks like about their child, like armchair psychology stuff. It's Armchair Expert.
Yeah.
And then he'll get experts in various fields on and just like talk to them and give them a platform they wouldn't normally have. It's super interesting, and it's honestly helped me a lot in my regular life. A lot of things they teach in AA apparently are applicable to just anyone's life about how to kind of manage your self-esteem and manage expectations and stuff like that, so that you're not trying to regulate with things that don't matter. But those are the ones. And there's one called Old Gods of Appalachia, which I really like. It's just a storytelling podcast, and it's about these witches and like eldritch things in like 1920s Appalachian America.
Yeah.
So those are my go-tos. Every now and then I'll turn on an episode of one here or there that I found, but those are my regular cycle.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I'm more into. I'm very historical, so I listen to a lot like the UK history ones, which mainly just dark history, very much.
Are you a hardcore history guy?
To extent, like it's a lot of UK based, but I do branch out and stuff like that. Yeah, but I do like the UK history because we always think we were the heroes and we're not.
As an American, I can't relate to that.
Saving everyone.
Still waiting for my thank you card from Vietnam.
Yeah, going back to the wrestling. So after the pandemic, you've since been going in a lot of like death matches, darker, like more weapon based matches. I've seen.
I'm doing more of it.
Yeah.
I would say I've done a lot, definitely compared to even like some people who wouldn't call themselves deathmatch wrestlers, but it really kind of came about because when ICW started doing Pit Fighter X, it's always been death match, but it was a lot more kind of like almost semi shoot fight centric at the beginning. I was like, I want to do that, especially in the pandemic. They were drawing like great crowds, and they were having a lot of good like pit fights with Dom in there and Brett Eisen and the Battle of the Tough Guys tournament at Mania that I was there for. I was like, yeah, I want to do this. And I had a good relationship with the Struggles. Shout out Strugs. And I talked to him, and I was like, hey man, he complimented my stuff. Would you be willing to put in a word for me? He's like, yeah, I'll do what I can. I showed up to a show in Texas to help them set up and make weapons, and I worked real hard for them. And so when they came to Chattanooga for TWE, where I was the champion, then it was a pretty easy sell to get me in there. And originally it was going to be me and Gary J. But Strugs went to bat for me again, and Danny DeMano hit me up, and he's like, hey, if I put you in the pit with John Wayne Murdoch, are you ready for that and everything that goes with that? And I was like, hell yes, I am. And, we had a match that I'm still really proud of to this day. And I remember one of the big takeaways for me from that, even though it was on my home turf, they made a point on commentary and social media. I was like, man, John Wayne Murdoch, he defends against the hometown guy all the time, and he still gets cheered because this was, peak John Wayne a couple years ago. And the crowd was pretty solidly in my corner, and they made a big deal of that. So, and that made me feel good. And this is something not a lot of people know. So John Wayne retained the American Deathmatch title against me in that match. Immediately after it went off air, he challenged me for my TWE championship.
Yeah.
And we went for like another 3 minutes, and I beat him to retain my title. And that was not something John Wayne had to do for me, but he did. And I'll always be thankful for it, because that's just the kind of pro that he is.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought John Wayne Murdoch up, because that was one of my next questions. Is how was it fighting John Wayne? Because I love every one of his matches.
I've John Wayne for a long time, because he was actually that IWA tryout show that I did was where him and Reed Bentley came up with the name, the tryout show Rejects, which eventually got shortened to Rejects.
Yeah.
but I was backstage with them talking, because my buddy Aaron knew Reed, and then Murdoch was just kind of there at the time, and me and Murdoch have crossed paths here and there in various like hardcore matches throughout the years. But I was excited to really mix it up one-on-one with him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he's just a big, actually, like, he's just one of them guys that you like every match, you know, is going to be a good match. He's just like that kind of, he can bring it out of everyone.
Yeah, he knows what the fuck he's doing too. Yeah, so I had that one. Then I had one against Brandon Kirk at the TW Arena, which was a lot of fun too. And I'm trying to remember some of my death matches I've had. I've done a lot more hardcore stuff at Anna Fight Underground.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, where I'm the champion currently. And I'm excited to see what kind of like fucking craziness Tomby gets up to. Actually, when I hit up Kumite, they were one of the first promotions over here to get back to me. I was like, yeah, we're familiar with your work and we like it. Are you cool with doing a hardcore match while you're here? I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah. Tomby's an experience. He wrestled a gentleman called Clint Margera the last show I went to, and there was just light tubes and bins and smoke, just a lot of smoke. Tomby brings a lot of smoke. But yeah, he's just a crazy guy. So you're gonna enjoy it.
Most of those deathmatch dudes are.
Yeah. So we'll get on to now. The recently the Merc was born. So where did the Merc come from?
Switching from Grand Bell to Merc was that was kind of a branding thing pitched to me by Warhorse. He likes the idea of the one name. And I think when I was doing it, so used to the stories. I was a mercenary. I worked for this Black Diamond Industries Corporation. When I wrestled Daniel Garcia at SCI, I lost, and I used that as an opportunity. I was like, I don't work for them anymore. My name's not Graham. Just call me Merc, and I'm a freelancer. But very shortly after that is when I switched kind of over to this Generalissimo gimmick that I do now, this wrestling tyrant. And so the name doesn't quite fit anymore. I'm still trying to figure that out, but it's what I've got, and it's what I'm going with right now. But the original mercenary gimmick was really, I blame Deadpool for it, because me and my buddy Luke are very much, at least backstage, we're very much kind of a Deadpool Cable type of, like, I'm very much the loud, obnoxious one that people get mad at, and Luke's got to be like, settle down.
Please stop.
And his humor is much more dry and soft. But I wanted to we had like a come to Jesus talk in the car one day, where it's just like, we can't just be wrestlers. Like, we need something right now. And for a long time, I'd had the image in my head of a wrestler just coming out with a big bazooka on his shoulder. This is when like entrance props were really big in wrestling, like about 7 years ago. And so we just kind of settled on that. And he did the eye patch and duster, and I came out with the goggles and the bazooka, and the Diamond Dogs were born. And so we just ran with that for a long time. And eventually, for a long time, I'd had this just visual in my head of this almost anime-based character, like the way they wear the fucking military hat and the jacket on their shoulders, and they're a boss fight.
Yeah.
And I needed to do something like that. And I watched a show on Netflix called How to Be a Tyrant, and it really just, it kind of ran down the playbook. It's like, this is how these dictators came to power and maintained it for so long, and how like this happens in the world. And I was like, man, a lot of this is really applicable to wrestling, because it's just like they scapegoat others. I'm like, well, who can I scapegoat? Internet darlings. That's an easy one, because I'm not very popular. they exploit their followers. Well, that's easy. Everyone's a loyalist. Everyone's a fan. Anyone who speaks out against me is a dissident, and we shun them.
Yeah.
Just so stuff like that, and it's just like the whole crux of the character is that I'm this horrible hypocrite. I'm trying to save wrestling. I'm doing this for you. I'm a real wrestler. I want to pay dues. I want you to pay dues, but it's all you pay me your dues. You work for me because I'm the way dictators
Any
have
tyrant
forever.
dictator, yeah.
Exactly. And I'm not dumb with it. I keep it away from anything actually political. I'm not out there drawing swastikas on shit.
Oh, boy.
I'm not hip, but there's just some universal truths in disgusting people. And so if I can make a wrestling character out of that,
Yeah.
with an interesting visual presentation, which, I get complimented on a lot, I think that's a win-win.
Yeah, definitely. It's only just come on the UK Netflix. That was literally in the last few weeks, so I'll give that a watch.
Really, they just came out with a second series in America, How to Be a Cult Leader.
There we go. So I might bring that to this channel. So as I mentioned, yeah, we've had a couple of questions come in, so we're a part of a Deathmatch UK Facebook group, so they were well up for this.
All right.
So his first question is, did you manage to smuggle in the bazooka?
No, it's funny that I still get questions about that because I quit using the bazooka almost entirely close to 2 years ago now. I love the bazooka, and I really do appreciate that people like remember it and stuff, but there was every now and then there'd get to a point where I was like, hey, you're the bazooka guy, and not, hey, you're Graham or you're Merc.
You're the Merc, yeah.
And so and that's one of those things, like, it was cool and it was a cool entrance piece, but like at a certain point, like I gotta grow away from that if I'm ever gonna be anything besides the bazooka guy. But unfortunately, I've never taken it across borders with me. It's just not worth the hassle.
Yeah, you'd expect. But that was the first part of his question. A gentleman called Nick Hughes. And then he's got a couple more. But seriously, first, what's your first impressions of the UK since you've been here? You've only been here 2 days, right?
Yeah, and I haven't. I can answer this better later today after I've been out in Liverpool some. But y'all's roads are fucking wild. I can't get over it. In America, you can just drive straight for a good 50 miles like any given time. But I'm not afraid of roundabouts like a lot of people in America. But it seems like you've got like 3 roundabouts connected to each other at any given time
You
here.
don't make it easy, yeah.
I've adjusted fairly well to like being on the other side of the road. I haven't driven any. Of course, the very first time I went to get in Dan's car, I tried to go to the driver's side because my passenger side. And even last night, I was talking to him, and I was just like leaned back in my seat. And I went like, because I went to rest my hand on the steering wheel because I was on that side of the car, and it just wasn't there. It just fell. But I really, one thing I always like about, and I've noticed this about Japan, is like, I just really like the aesthetic. It feels like a different time in a way. And maybe that's just because of like the shows I've watched and everything. But like Japan, weirdly, like out in the country, had this almost like mid to late 90s aesthetic. And I'm sure that's just my interpretation of it, just the way everything was painted and looked on the inside. And there's a little bit of that here, I think, just because everything's older. And I really do forget, like in America, how spoiled we are on like how modern everything is. We get new stuff all the time. Buildings are constantly being like renovated and new stuff put in, and just seeing like some of these older houses is just really cool. I'm digging it so far. I like that I bought a bunch of groceries the other day for like $32, which would have ran me like twice as much in America.
Yeah. As you mentioned like earlier, thinking about, I was bringing up like that 17-hour car ride. 17 hours driving in the UK, you'd be in the sea if you drove from the top to the bottom.
No, that's a fun thing. It's crazy once it dawned on me how densely packed it is with shows. Like there was a show running, I want to say like 100 yards away from the show I was at yesterday, just because there are so many shows. Yeah. Sorry, my jaw had to pop there. So that's surprising, but I was thinking about that because like a 3 hour drive is nothing to me. I do that and come home like constantly, but I'm very used to doing 8 hour drives and having to sleep in my car some. So that was it's a trip. Like we were an hour from Dan's house yesterday, and we just came home, had all night to just stay up and watch TV.
Yeah, it's insane. Like 8 hours, like that. You'd literally drive from here 8 hours. You're in a different country in Scotland.
Right? Yeah.
It's incredible. And then the third part of his question, which is kind of, he went, who would be kind of like your dream opponent during this trip? Like if you could wrestle any UK wrestler.
That's tough because I know that the UK scene has changed a lot in the
Yeah.
past few years. Obviously, for better or worse. Um, man, UK wrestler. That's really tough. I might have to think on that one for a while. I know it was talked about briefly. I wouldn't mind mixing up with Clint Margera,
So good.
death match or not. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And yeah, he's gonna be my answer for now for sure. If I had to pick one, it'd be him.
Yeah, he's like the Clint Margera is so underrated UK wise. He was the from when my local wrestling promotion, he was the champion for like 400, 500 days.
Oh wow.
Just insane, insanely, and like the everyone thinks of him deathmatch wise, but like my hometown promotion, it's not deathmatch wrestling at all. It was just general wrestling. So underrated. And then we'll move on to a couple of more questions. So one that we have on every show is a movie of your life. What actor would you like to play you?
Hmm. That's really tough. I like Brad Pitt. He's just a good actor. I'd love for people to think I was that attractive. Um, Trying to think, man, I don't know any actors around my age now. They're all either older or way younger. Give Timothy Chalamet a few years, maybe he can. He might be a little too like serious and brooding. Just not have my chaotic, wild energy. um, but I like Leo too. Like my brain always kind of goes to DiCaprio when I think of like stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think he'd be my pick.
DiCaprio.
Or Tom. Yeah.
Eventually, what we're probably going to do is, because we ask that question in every show, is we're probably just going to build a film with everyone as their characters and see what happens. High budget film, sponsored by this low budget podcast. And then, typical questions you probably heard. What is your favourite match that you've had?
Probably my match against Daniel Garcia from the 2021 Scenic City Invitational. It was just a solid match, super good match. I got a standing ovation afterwards, even though I lost from that crowd. Like that's my home crowd. It's 10 hours from where I live, and that's my home company. You know, I haven't wrestled there in a year. Like Chattanooga is always going to be home. They kept me alive as a wrestler during the reopening stages of the pandemic. So
Okay.
that's that match was really special for me. It was my first time in the Scenic City Invitational. Daniel Garcia to this day is one of the only like big names I've ever gotten to wrestle, and he was super happy with it and complimentary after, and I just loved it.
It's always good. And then one we normally round up on before we kind of wrap it up. So dream matches, either. So the first part of it is someone that's around now, and then the other dream match is someone that's either retired or has passed away.
Dream match of guys that are around now. I like Shibata and Kenta a lot. To wrestle someone who can kick harder than me, for one, is not an opportunity I get often, but one I would relish. And I love both of their works immensely. So they would definitely be up there if I could wrestle either of them. Um, as far as guys that are current, and there are tons of guys I'd like to wrestle, obviously, but those are ones that come to mind immediately as far as dream matches. Retired or past, um, 2008 Jeff Hardy is pretty near the top of that list. RIP 2008 Jeff Hardy. I don't know what 2023 Jeff Hardy could really do for me. but I would, but
It's
I
weird
wouldn't
saying
turn
that,
it
isn't
down. I wouldn't turn it down for sure. It wouldn't be good, but I'd just love to wrestle Goldberg. He's my all-time favorite wrestler. Ever since I was a little kid, I'll always be a Goldberg guy, much to the chagrin of almost every independent wrestler in the world. And I love seeing the horrified reactions when I tell people that. Um, Trying to think, guys, I'll never. Because I'm trying to think of deceased ones now. Um, I don't know. Goldberg really is. He's at the top of the list. If I had to pick like a deceased one, like Misawa
Oh
and
yeah,
Kawada would be two guys that are up there.
in a triple threat.
For
There
a
you
long
go.
for a long time, Misawa was like he was at the top of the list for me for Japanese wrestling. He was my favorite Japanese guy. The more I learn about the history of King's Road and the more I learn about Kawada, the more I relate to Kawada as far as like never being one of the guys who never quite got the break, who's working hard and like is just as good but isn't seen as the ace. I really like relate to Kawada's story, and I that makes me appreciate his style and everything a lot more. But those are my top two pillars for sure. Like Kobashi's a strong third, and then Holloway just should get the number 4 carved into his headstone.
Poor guy.
But but yeah, I'm a Masawa and Kawada would be like the dead and retired choices for dream matches for me.
Yeah, like I was late to All Japan, like the old school All Japan, like but Kabashi's my favorite, like just incredible. Like they're all
He's
three of them. Which
he's so fucking good, and like everyone likes to like you joke about Taue, but Taue's incredible
yeah,
too. He knew what he needed to do, and like I honestly I still put Taue above Akiyama.
yeah, it's such a trouble with him, isn't it? It's kind of like you're around at that period where Kabashi, Masawa, and Kawada are around as well.
Right.
And then yeah, Hakiyama. But yeah, so that's the end. Thank you for coming on. We've got
Pleasure.
your Twitter handle down below. Is there anything else you'd like to plug while you've got the chance?
Not particularly. I don't make enough content, so I don't really have anything to plug. Follow me on the media, like and retweet my things. Hit me up to buy merch because I don't like dealing with like t-shirt companies and
Yeah,
stuff that much. I don't make anything from it with as little merch as I sell online. Just hit me up and I'll do my best to pay shipping unless you are in the UK. I might have to
tough
charge you a
luck.
bit more for that. I've got merch with me while I'm here, so if you're at a show, hit me up, throw me a few pounds, and help pay for my groceries while I'm here.
I was going to mention if you got because I'll definitely pick some merch up while I'm at Kumite.
Absolutely. Pins, t-shirts, and 8x10s.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll definitely be involved in that. But yeah,
Hell
so as usual for everyone else, like and subscribe, comment who you'd like to come on going forward because you know we can bring anyone on now. Um, ask about Kobashi. Good God, imagine that. As usual, yeah, like and comment, subscribe. We're happy just to bring you wrestling. And once again, yeah, thank you for coming on.
glad to do it, man. It was a blast.
No worries, and thank you everyone. Goodbye.